I mean, the Ukraine war is a war that should never have happened. And by the way, my son Connor went over to Ukraine and fought over there, and he fought in the Kharkiv offensive because, he looked at Putin as a bully who had invaded this country. The war really was about security. It wasn't about territory for the Russians. And what the Russians for 30 years, since 1992, have been saying you cannot put NATO in Ukraine because the Russians have been invaded three times through Ukraine. The last time, when Hitler invaded them, he killed 1 out of every 7 Russians. So they have a legitimate security concern. Also, we walked away from, in the last 6 years, from 2 nuclear weapons missile treaties, 2 intermediate nuclear treaties that prevented us, prior to that, from putting missiles in Europe that could hit Moscow. So then we let me go back a little. In 1992, when the Soviets disbanded the Soviet Union, when Gorbachev disbanded it, he allowed us to unite Germany under East and West Germany under a NATO army. They moved out the Russian army, the Red Army, 450,000 troops, but the one promise he extracted, he said, you have to promise me that you will not move NATO to the east. James Baker, President Bush, John Major, all said in England, all said we will not move it 1 inch to the east, famously. And since then, we've moved it 1,000 miles to the east and into 14 countries. And the one thing they said is you can't put it in Ukraine. And that's what precipitated this war. We went in there in 2014. We overthrew the government, the elected government of Ukraine, put in a government that would invite NATO in, and the Russians responded. And the Russians asked for a peace treaty. We negotiated one. France, Germany negotiated the Minsk Accords. And then we double-crossed the Russians and went inside it. And then in April of 2022, Zelensky negotiated another agreement and initialed it with Putin. And Putin was withdrawing his troops. And President Biden sent Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of England, to Kiev to force Zelensky to tear up that agreement. And since then, 600,000 kids have died. And if that agreement if they just left it alone, Donbass and Lugansk would still be part of Ukraine and all of those mineral wealth, and we wanted the war. And we've spent $200 billion, which, by the way, we need in this country. We've got a lot of desperate people in this country now. And we can't afford to be engaged in wars that are this close to nuclear engagement.
And so Trump is going to work on that with you. I mean, that was one of the things that you united on, right?
But he said from the beginning, I'll settle this. Whatever you say about President Trump, he's a real estate guy, and he'd rather do a deal than have a war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Russia, I mean, it's harder now to do a good deal because the Russians have made a profound sacrifice, and they're, and now Putin said from the beginning, I'm scared they're going to use Ukraine to attack Russia. So now Zelensky has confirmed that by sending a NATO-supported invasion of Russia in Kursk. And everything the Russians were saying about this from the beginning has turned out to be true. And so, we need to settle that war, and we need to start building a community.